Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to one of our chamber podcasts. We've had some pretty interesting topics lately, and we've been focusing the last couple of podcasts on some of our messaging around Business Month, right? So, courage, commerce, and community. So you heard about courage the other day as we talked to a county commissioner, Gunner Mom. We've talked about community. So today we're going to talk about commerce. And joining me today is one of our board members. And actually, I'll let you introduce yourself so that you get tired of hearing from me. So
All right.
introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is David Cook. I am with First National Bank of Omaha, FNBO, also on the board chamber. And then I am also a trustee for the hospital here in Cheyenne, CRMC. So believe very heavily in being involved and just looking forward to continuing to grow our city.
So FNBO, you're a banker,
I'm a banker.
right? And so we want to talk about commerce, right? So I guess just to get started, you look out at Cheyenne and Laramie County, and even probably a greater area being with FNBO. But what do you see what do you see in our economy? What are we doing well? What are we struggling with? What are some of the potential pitfalls that you see coming up?
You bet. With the Federal Reserve going to be looking at interest rates here actually next week, or depending upon when this comes out this week, we do anticipate that the Fed will be lowering the prime rate. That hopefully will start to spur a little bit more activity. We have seen over time, because of the little bit higher rates, we've seen a slowdown. I think Cheyenne, Laramie, Casper, they're positioned well overall, but a decrease in the interest rates that are someone who is getting a loan, having that lower cost will be beneficial going forward. See a lot of activity in Cheyenne. I think there's more activity to be had though.
So, interest rates are always an interesting thing because the Fed comes out and maybe it'll do quarter, maybe do half. I mean, it could do more than that and could do a couple in a row here. But interest rates really have a big impact on people's psyche, don't they?
It does. We look at mortgage rates consistently. They've been too high for a common consumer to afford that higher interest rate and purchase a home. So hopefully with a lower interest rate, more people would be able to purchase a home, come back into the market where they weren't before. So it does play on your psyche. It's been great for our consumers that are saving money and putting funds aside, but that's changing now.
So I want to get into the business side a little bit, but before we do, I think this is something people are unaware of. So we talk about mortgage rates all the time, and certainly in an election year, you hear about them ad nauseum, right? And I was educated in Oklahoma, so my education is a challenge for me. But I always my understanding is that mortgage rates are actually tied to treasuries, and they really don't have anything to do with the rate that the Fed puts out. Correct. Although they tend to follow each other. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. So what we see though is the long-term rates are coming down on the treasury rates. So that means then we can lend those funds back out at a lower interest rate.
Right. So but the mortgage rates, they've been ticking down for a while, right?
They
had
bopped
month up there pretty good, but
yep.
Sixes somewhere right
We're
now.
seeing actual rates into the high fives.
Okay.
So I think that is a tipping point for a lot of people to see that it's below 6%.
Gotcha. So if I'm a business owner, though, that interest rate is everything to me, right?
It is.
It's going to affect me, and my first employer, he always said when they didn't have a bunch of really loans, but when he is a startup guy, right? I think this is especially important for them. that he laid in bed at night and he just heard tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, and that was the interest clock
Mm-hmm.
ticking in his head. So
Yep.
he was very aware at all
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 times.
all times for that. So just as you talk to businesses in the community of all kinds, what do you what do you think they see? I mean, obviously, interest rates are a challenge, but what do you think their biggest worries are right now?
There's a couple of different things, Dale, that I think are concerning to a lot of businesses. We're really seeing a uptick in fraud. We've had a lot of customers experience fraud firsthand. So that's one of the concerns out there. The other is just what the state of the economy in general. There's going to be change no matter which one wins, there's going to be change. And so that uncertainty, I think, in the market is also something that people are really concerned about.
Yeah, I think the inflation has really kicked
Hmm.
into a lot of people and something they continue to be concerned about. I had a
Yep.
guy tell me the other day, and I mean this. I hang out in eastern Laramie County with a bunch of ranchers, but he said, I'll sell cattle for the most money in the history of my place this
Hmm.
year and will make the least money I've made in 20 years.
Yep.
Just because all of the expenses are, and he, you know, as ranchers tend to do, he might have exaggerated that a little
Well,
bit, you're right, but there's a lot of truth to what he's saying,
yeah,
right? Is while his what he's getting paid, and this applies to a lot of businesses,
it
I
does.
think.
Yep.
So we haven't quite got through all the pandemic hangover. A lot of
Hmm.
businesses I talk to have supply chain issues still,
Yep.
right? One little part that you might have to get to fix your vehicle or fix a machine in your factory or repair a piece of equipment in your office or small business. It's you can't get it for any price. It's just
It's just
kind of
not
a waiting
available.
thing, and that gets to be risk
Yep.
for these businesses, and certainly they're concerned about that. So, what do you hear about workforce in the community?
Um, Unfortunately, I still see a lot of help wanted signs out
Hmm.
there. I think we still need more additional workers, some qualified workers, and even, maybe some temporary workers. I really do see if we're going to grow, we're going to have to attract additional employees for the community.
So, you know, if unfortunately, I think it's a long term problem when
Hmm.
we look at a lot of data with the U.S. Chamber, and when we look at that data, it's kind of a nationwide problem, right? So a lot of these problems, I think in Wyoming we were a little bit immune to over history,
Hmm.
but not necessarily anymore, right? So we have a shortage of workers here, a big shortage of skilled workers.
Hmm.
Um, we are not having as many live births from the American population as we did. So we're on about a 30-year trend, um, 30-year trend where workforce is going to be really tough, I think. So what do you think businesses do to, what do you do when you
Yeah.
can't find workforce?
And I think, for those mom and pops, unfortunately, they work a little bit more. They pick up the slack, which creates, some difficulty. Additional things have to still occur, but it just becomes more difficult to do business in general. Um, so, I don't know what the answer is, but we got to work through it.
I think we're going to have to take a multi-prong approach, right? We're going to have to figure out ways to have our young people stay in the state.
Hmm.
We're going to have to be attractive to young workers that they are interested in moving here. It's something that concerns me is that our average age is ticking up a little bit in the
It
last
is.
decade.
Yep.
So how are we going to attract young workers? How are we going to get them to stay here,
Hmm.
raise their families here? But that won't do it alone, right? So businesses are going to have to figure out how to use technology, and there's a lot of
Yes,
pretty cool technology in the world,
there
right?
is. Yep.
I sat and watched a tractor run in a field next to me in my house at my house in eastern Laramie County the other day, and the guy was turned to the side working on his
All
computer while
right.
the computer drove, GPS drove his tractor. So I think we're going to have to think about that across all industries,
Yep.
to figure out how we do that. I had a member of our chamber last week tell me that if Betsy and I didn't quit it, that it was great to have the industrial projects and the military projects and the small business openings and all that, but that we were going to have to quit it, or he was going to have to shut down because he couldn't get workforce. Right? So
Yeah.
he said that tongue in cheek, everybody. So
But
don't get too excited about it. Yeah, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do think workforce is a pretty continued challenge. So a couple of these areas the chamber really dives into. Certainly the workforce side. You mentioned the fraud. That fraud, for us, a lot of it is retail kind of crime, and
It is.
certainly crime in other areas too, like construction sites. But something we're very interested in working on. We passed a good piece of legislation a couple years ago, but we got to get some more tools in the hands of law enforcement, and we're going to have to do some work for it nationally too. Well, we probably got everybody depressed about
Yes.
enough. So when you look out at our economy, what makes you hopeful? Where do you think people's eyes are to that are things that look good in our community?
I still see growth. It's a little slower, but there's still opportunities out there. See new businesses coming in, um, starting to be a little bit more each month now. Some new openings for businesses. So I think we're on the right path to improving. I think we've got great people here, Dale. I mean, there's like the chamber, it really supports the community and the business people. So I think we have the right people in place to help the city grow. Of course, politicians, and I'll point at Gunnar Malm, I think he does a tremendous job. And I think we've got the right people.
I think we are doing pretty well. I think we're doing probably better than most people really realize, right? So I think the job demand is a good indicator of that, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you got businesses that are wanting to hire people, um, that is a really good sign, right? Employment is a kind of a baseline economic indicator for us. And you drive around town and you see people with help wanted signs, right? And good jobs, right? I mean,
Exactly.
lot of places in town right now, kind of $20 an hour, 18, $20 an hour is kind of starting wage.
Yeah, it is.
And we've got pretty good opportunities all over town. So I think that part is uh, probably true, right? Um, so if I'm so when you talk to these small businesses or businesses of any size that are moving here,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think they see as Wyoming and Cheyenne's number one calling card to moving to our area? Why do they say, I think that's a good place to start my business. That's a good place to move my business. And certainly, you mentioned the right people in place,
Right.
but there's got to be more than right people in place, right? It's got to be some on the ground causative things. What do you think they identify as positive?
Okay. I think a very active chamber, very active leads organization. There's a lot, the state being here, Warren Air Force Base being here. I think that there's a lot of synergy from all of that economic drivers, which are very beneficial. But really, it's just, I think, being in Wyoming, um, there are there's drive here.
Yeah.
You can see it, and having a lobbyist in D.C., having the local representation, you can actually still talk to the governor one on one. I think those are big benefits that some people kind of overlook.
One of the things that I think has really interested businesses in our area, um, and something that not only the chamber but economic development organizations here and around the state have worked on very hard is try to keep this business-friendly tax climate
Mm-hmm.
that supports free enterprise. Um, do you hear that talked about much, or?
I hear it talked about, but I don't hear it day to day, I guess. But it's definitely a driver for a lot of these bigger companies.
So it is something that, that is indicated to us that, this is a reason we looked at you. Maybe not it can't be the reason you make the move or start
Right.
the business, because that in itself is not enough.
Right.
But it is a calling card of sorts, where I think people look at us and say, their tax system's pretty good. I'm very concerned about that tax system moving forward, right?
Right.
Um, we are one of the lowest tax states in the nation, and there's talk about removing some of the residential side, which seems great. But when we have done that in the past, we have taken that responsibility and rolled it over to business. And really, in Wyoming, we've rolled it onto the oil and gas and mining
For
industry,
the longest
but
time.
some other industries too.
Right.
And I'm very concerned if we started messing with that, what I consider to be a pretty darn good system that we've worked very hard to achieve, what that might do to us.
Yeah. I don't think the entire tax code needs to be rewritten or any of that. I think there's little tweaks that can be made, but they have to be made with understanding the entire how everyone is impacted by those. That services aren't reduced or not provided because of these tax breaks, and it's something that has to be looked at very carefully.
I had an interesting conversation with a gentleman the other day. He's an older gentleman in the community. He is a political refugee from California that has moved here within about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And he had read some of the chamber stuff, and where we were putting out, hey, look, um, we're not a no tax organization. We are a low tax organization, but we still believe that we should educate our kids, make sure that our roads are paved. It'd be nice for the roads to be cleared when it snowed.
Yes.
Some of those community services, good water, we want it to be efficient as possible, but it does take some money to run that. And he said, well, I bought my house 5 years ago. I should never have to pay any taxes. This inflation on my house is just ridiculous that I have to pay taxes on. And I'm sure in some parts of the state and maybe some parts of our community that is true. But my question back to him was, and I said, well, you never want to pay more taxes than what your asset cost you. I said, can I buy your house for what you paid for 7 years ago? And he said, why no?
Right.
And I said, well, these two kind of go hand in hand, right? So you do stand the chance to make money. So we want to talk about that in an effective way from the chamber.
Right.
But I think in order to have the quality of life, entice the young folks, etc., young folks, I sound like an old codger there, to entice younger people to be interested in the community, we're going to have to keep a careful balance on that.
Right.
Kind of our tax system, and when we make changes, we need to be darn careful about that, because you can impact a lot of things through just a little tweak in the tax system. So if I was a new business and I walked into your office and said I'm gonna open up a business,
Okay.
what are the things you're gonna tell me that here's what I want you to look at before you decide to do that?
For us, it's just that you have a good plan, have the understanding of how your business will uh, be seen in the community, what kinds of services that you are going to provide. Are they beneficial to the community in general? Are you going to provide services that are already here? To me, it's just having a good plan, understanding what you want to do, and knowing the community.
So, we get a lot of people that come into the chamber that say, oh, I want to start a business. I need to know what to do. And I think a commonality with many of them is that they are good at doing something, right? Whether making widgets or making cupcakes or whatever they might do, right? But they have not spent 1 minute thinking about, this is my business plan. Here's how I'm going to market this here. And the other thing they hadn't thought of, and this is very common, not just here, I think everywhere, but how much money they will need to have
Yes.
saved up
Mm-hmm.
to be able to move forward.
Yep.
This is a concern, I think, for chambers across America right now. That going through the pandemic, the nation was flush with cash,
Yes.
but that is quickly dwindling, and a lot of people don't have this. Seem to be short on the savings to buy a house, start a business,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't tell you how important it is to be a have money in savings, or two, be purchasing assets that are liquid, so
Yeah.
that if you decide to make this change, you can. So you kind of get that reported nationally. Do we see that same thing locally, or?
I do, Dale. Unfortunately, we've had people come into the bank and go, well, I want to start this business and this is how much it's going to cost. And they expect the bank to fund the entire cost. That's not the way we're set up. That's not reasonable, but they don't really think through. You've got to have some liquidity set aside. You've got to have the operating costs. Um, Things are a lot costlier than they were 2, 3 years ago.
Mhm.
So have you thought through all of those costs? So
So if I'm one of those businesses, and I want to go to a bank and borrow that money, what kind of equity do I need to have up front? What do you think is a kind of standard? I mean, I get it. There'll always be variations for who you are and what you're doing, and
exactly.
right. But what's kind of a industry standard for you guys about? Hey, look, we'd expect you to be able to come up with this much.
Yeah, and I'm going to exclude like SBA loans or any of those additional programs, but normally for real estate, the bank will fund about 75%
Mm-hmm.
of the cost or value. And then for equipment, we can go a little bit higher, maybe 80%, as long as it's not specialized. If it's specialized, we have to, back that off a little bit. It's really based on risk. If you're coming to the table and, we see you have 25, 30% in liquidity, well, maybe we can loan you a little bit more, but it's really important that the individual has something at risk.
So I've always kind of noticed this, and to me, even when I was a college student going through economics, it always seemed a little weird to me that real estate seems like it is a good investment over time,
Yep.
right? I think we all know that. Um, you know, I mean, it's what Grandpa always told you, buy dirt,
Yep.
right? And yet, when we're in a business scenario, actually, that dirt in some ways is not as good of an asset to purchase as it is equipment. Is that because of liquidity?
It is. I mean, just tying that up, and if things go south, unfortunately, if you see a bank has the real estate, you'll never get the value out of it. I mean, people look at that and go, "Oh, that's a fire sale. I'm
Oh,
not
gotcha.
gonna bid the whole thing." That in and of itself is an impact, but it's harder to liquidate land, just because the bank has to go through all the certain steps to make sure we're in the proper position and all of that. But
And
yeah,
you don't view lending as real estate investment, right?
no, exactly. Yeah.
Where you want to take risks for longer time. So I get that. I've just always found that fascinating. So.
Yep.
Well, we try to keep these to just 15, 20 minutes, and I'm sure we're getting close to that time, or maybe a little over at this point. So, uh, how about some closing thoughts for everybody, just from a commerce standpoint? Um, when you think of commerce in our community, how do you feel about it? How do you view it?
Hmm.
Leave some positive words for our viewers.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we have the potential in Cheyenne to continue to grow, to expand our community, to really be a better community overall. I think the chamber, from its perspective, representing the business community, has some great ideas, some great focus that we can help the community move forward more. I'm encouraged that we will see additional growth in Cheyenne. encouraged that we'll be seeing, Warren Air Force Base with their improvements that are forecast there. We're going to see a long-term trajectory of improving conditions. I'm excited to be involved in the community. I've been here 35 years. It's home, and I want to continue to see it grow.
One of the things that I respect most about Cheyenne and respect most about the Chamber of Commerce is that we are really a community, and I would say in particular an organization where we do have a long view down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that faith and hope in the future and working on these problems, stuff like workforce and developing Warren Air Force Base or developing our industrial base,
Mm-hmm.
is not a problem that you go out and say, we're gonna fix that tomorrow, right?
Flip a switch.
And it's ongoing work, right? You never really get to a final solution. You're always working for more in the future. And a lot of what we work on, frankly, I'll be in a wheelchair drooling. So will you, Dave.
Yes, yeah.
You're right. Um, and
And they're still doing it.
and it will. Those are the projects we're working on, and yet we still have people that are totally committed to that. I'm very appreciative of this community for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Glad you could spend a few minutes watching the Chamber podcast. We'll see you next time.